Another thing that you can do is to pitch your voice at a different timbre. For instance, you can talk down here, and if I'm the only one talking down here, then even if there's other noise, other people can still hear me because the frequency that I'm talking at is different. Another way of thinking of this, which might be a little clearer, is to imagine a Boy Scout troop or a scouting troop out in the woods in the middle of the night, practicing their Morse code with colored flashlights. And if the orange flashlights are talking to each other and the green flashlights are talking to each other and the blue flashlights are talking to each other, this is an example of pitching your voice at a different frequency so that you know only to look at that frequency. And that's called frequency division multiple access, or FDMA. These are the two most common varieties of transmission that are used in satellite communications. There's many others. There are combinations of the two. There are permutations of the two. One of the most common is, again, back to the people sitting at a dinner table. Most human beings have a voice that's in a certain range, and that's pretty much true wherever you are in the world. Some people are slightly higher. Some people sing soprano. Other people slightly lower. Some people sing bass, like Barry White kind of thing. Most people are in the middle somewhere. And so when you have 100 people, 200 people, 1,000 people all talking in the same room, sometimes that's difficult, right? Well, what if we're the only two people at the table speaking French? That suddenly gets a lot easier to use. And that's what your cell phone towers often do, and it's how they're able to squash a whole bunch of transmissions into the same frequency bands in a small localized area at fairly low power, is they basically encode each of the signals with a slightly different code, and they know based on those codes which pairs of conversations go with each other. Like I say, there are many different ways in which to compact the information into a limited frequency band. We're talking about megahertz, gigahertz, but when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of terminals trying to use these same satellites, that squashes really quickly. And so satellite bandwidth is still pretty scarce as a resource. So one of the big things that we try to do is figure out how we can fit the most people onto this limited space as we can. One of those ways is by pricing people out of it. In other words, if you can afford this space, it's yours. That's not going to cut it anymore. That's just not going to cut it, because somebody out there is going to realize that there's a market of billions of human beings on the planet, and they're going to go after it. Another person might say, well, yeah, we can use the language thing and we can use the time division thing, but what if we did it all at the same time? And so suddenly you can have time division multiple access carriers that are accessing at the same time because they're using a different language or pseudo language. Then you can use others where if somebody's up and already operating at a particular spot, but you've got something you need to send, well, we can just bop you over here and use this frequency for a second. All kinds of different ways we can do this. One of the hurdles that you end up with, though, is that the more you compress this bandwidth, the more that you compact the information. And we do compact the information. It's not one signal bit going up and coming down to equal one data bit. We're anymore talking about a dozen or 24 information bits being compacted into a single signal bit via conversion. If you lose a bit because of static, because of a glitchy connection, because of interference, suddenly you're losing a lot more information. So how do we protect it? Let's see. Broken symmetry, is that one directed at me or someone else? Was I born on a leap year? I was not born on a leap year. Right. Okay. So sidetracked. one of the ways that we can protect the information stream is by taking the stream of digital ones and zeros and offsetting it. In other words, if I have 4 information bits, I can duplicate those 4 information bits and then offset them and add them together. And it makes a new data stream. And the advantage of this data stream is that this bit right here has the information for both the second bit and the first bit contained within it. So if I lose this, then I can go to this guy and say, well, I know what that first bit was, so I can process that. And I can go to this bit here and say, well, I know I can figure out what this bit is because of these guys here. And so even though I totally lost what that bit was, I can still cover it just with math. It's called forward error correction. And it's a little more complicated than that. That's very simplified. But the basic premise is you duplicate the data stream, you offset it, you add it back together, and now if you lose one particular signal bit, you can still get the information from other parts of the stream. Pirates of Penzance chatter. Gotcha. That makes more sense. Any questions or anything somebody wants to hear about just now? Because there are some interesting things that we're about to get to here. We need to talk about how Earth isn't a perfect ball, and how this geosynchronous orbit thing doesn't work for long periods of time without help. Because unfortunately, we have other things in the solar system like a moon and a sun and other planets and so forth. And so over time, the moon and sun will tug on these satellites as they go by. And every time they go by, they get tugged, which is another word for accelerated. And anytime you accelerate something in orbit, and that's what they call it, whether you're slowing down or speeding up, is an acceleration. It just depends on what direction. You start to change the orbit. And if you perturb a geostationary orbit, suddenly it's not geostationary anymore. Are the types of encryption allowed dictated by SatOps? Usually the types of encryption allowed are determined in advance by the link planners. Certain types of encryption give you better power to signal ratios, better energy per signal bit over noise floor is what that's called, SNO, or just energy per bit over noise floor. And so they'll give you more power for each bit, making them more easy to interpret in spite of interference or background noise or what have you. The problem is a lot of those encryption types tend to be lower data rate, lower compression rate, if you will. And so it's a trade-off between how much data can we fit per signal bit versus how easy is it to read that signal bit. This is exactly the sort of problem you run into with deep space probes like the New Horizons or with the Voyager probes. The farther away you go, the quieter that signal gets compared to the rest of the universe, which is quite loud by comparison. And so it's a bit like talking with someone standing on a beach that's a foot from you and talking with someone on a beach that is 500 meters from you with the pounding surf and the wind and so forth. It's, hi, how are you? My name's Dave versus, hi, how are you? What? Yeah, it's... And yes, encryption does affect bit rate. Absolutely. Any resources to learn more about SatCom operation or orbital mechanics? I really want to have a career in satellite industry, space industry, optical comm course. Oh, that's really cool. That'll get you some interesting jobs. And learn about how we can use that for deep space exploration. Absolutely, Florio Space. The best thing is to find somewhere that you can get hands-on experience. Most people will get that by going through degree programs at either community colleges or universities. I went a slightly different route. I went via the military and was able to test into a job that allows me now to do this, even though I actually don't have a college degree. They gave me the training that I needed. They gave me the experience I needed. I've worked with all kinds of equipment in all kinds of places and all kinds of satellites. And the experience is the main thing. Getting your hands on a piece of equipment, getting your teeth sunk into various concepts. For instance, one that I haven't gone over because I thought it was a little bit esoteric is this idea of EIRP. I don't know if you've heard of that, Florio Space. It stands for Effective Isotropic Radiative Power. Most satellite dishes these days are not like your AM radio antenna where it's just radiating in all directions and the antenna receiving it can get it from all directions. It's some kind of directional antenna. All EIRP is meant to do is to calculate if it were emitting in all directions, what would the power have to be for it to be emitting the power that it does in the desired direction, if that makes sense. In other words, if I'm just emitting power in this narrow beam here, the amount of power that I receive here, the EIRP is what? What would I have to emit to get that same power everywhere? EIRP. There you go. Yeah, perfect. And there are ways to calculate it. There are formulas. Learning how to translate decibels, dB, we usually think of that in terms of sound, but that's really a power rating. And it can be used for both sound and for things like radio emissions, microwave emissions. That actually reminds me of something. I remember having a discussion before, I think it might have been the last Hangout-a-thon. Somebody asked about microwaves, and I mentioned that the microwaves in your microwave oven are actually about the same frequency as your cell phone towers and a lot of satellite terminals. And the main difference is that your microwave oven does it at a much higher power rate than any of these other antennas. And one of the ways you can test that, whether your microwave has leaks, is put your cell phone in the oven, close the door, and have somebody call it. And if your phone rings, then your microwave has leaks and you might want to replace it. Just had my final with conversions to dBm. Yep, decibels is related to milliwatts. So you already know that 3 decibels up means you've doubled the power, and 3 decibels down means you've halved the power, you've cut it in half. It's a logarithmic function rather than being a linear one. And it's crazy. We use spectrum analyzers all the time, and a lot of the time when we're getting signals back from these spacecraft, just in geosynchronous orbit or even low Earth orbit, you'll get signals back that are at minus 30 dBm, minus 50 dBm, minus 70 dBm. And you start converting and you're realizing that this is like hundreds of thousandths or millionths of watts of power that we're somehow still using, and it's perfectly fine. Oh no, they're calling from inside the microwave. That would be bad. Hey, congratulations, RS Winter 45. That's pretty awesome. All right. Let's see. So, having worked with these microwave antennas or microwave frequency antennas, there's a joke out there that people that work in SatCom only have daughters, like that's somehow going to affect you. It's not. There are differences between different kinds of radiation. One of the things that I mentioned at the beginning was how we have a whole spectrum of electromagnetic frequencies. Microwaves are in the part of the spectrum that's called non-ionizing radiation, because even at super high power, they can't strip electrons off of atoms or split molecules or things like that. They just can't. They don't have the energy for it. They're not the right wavelength. They don't transfer energy well that way. It's not until you get up into the higher end UV or X-rays that you start getting ionizing radiation, and that's where you really run into problems. Now, in all fairness, you can cook. That's why we have microwave ovens. And at the high enough power, then yeah, you're going to start to get burned, and you're going to feel like you're getting burned, and that's one of the clues that you've got a leak somewhere and you need to fix it. But it's not going to do you DNA damage or things like that. If your phone doesn't ring in the microwave, put your precious electronics... Yes, that's a good plan, actually. No, I don't know. You'd have to know that the next Carrington event was coming, I guess. Some of my favorite science Twitch streamers are daughters. Absolutely, Broken Symmetry. Absolutely. I'm so spoiled. I thought CA equals California. Was curious why there was a California and a U.S. version. Separate countries, right? No. I am the most interesting man in the world. I am not, actually. If I was, I'd be retired right now. I'd be the old Dos Equis guy. But I appreciate the compliment. Any other questions on what we've done so far, or any particular direction you want me to go before we get back into doing the long distance communications, to things like Voyager and Cassini and stuff like that? While we wait, I will remind that this is a hangout-a-thon for a purpose, so we're not just sharing stories and science. We're asking for your help. Follows are free. Giving us subs over on YouTube is free. It helps us because after a certain number of subs, we start to collect ad revenue from our ads on YouTube. Subs here on Twitch means you don't have to sit through ads, which we really do have to play unless we get enough donations. You win me, sir. Cassini Communications, RIP. Yeah, I was watching that stream when Cassini went into the upper atmosphere. And every so often they would cut to the spectrum analyzer that would show the transmissions from that satellite. And I'd be like, ooh, that's a really pretty signal. Ooh, no, there it goes. Oh, no, it's gone. And you shed, tiny tear of joy and also sorrow, because Cassini really was an amazing mission. So much we're even still learning from that satellite. But yeah, this may come as a surprise to some of you. The solar system is big. Mars is not quite half, again, the distance from the sun that Earth is. But Jupiter is twice the distance from the sun that Mars is, and Saturn is almost twice the distance from the sun that Jupiter is. And it keeps going out that way. Uranus is even farther. Neptune is even farther. And there's this thing called the inverse square law. The farther you go out, your distance may increase linearly or by the square, but your power gets spread out over a volume, and so it starts to decrease geometrically. For science! I love it. Yay, thanks, Broken Symmetry. That's great. They killed her. Oh, but they learned so much while they did it. The last several orbits sent Cassini in between the bottom edge of the rings and the upper edge of the atmosphere of the planet, and found out that, as some models had predicted, there was actually material coming off of the rings and falling back into Saturn, that ring rain was actually a thing. Even though, as you look at it from a telescope, it looks like that area is pretty much clear. And the reason it's clear is because there aren't really a whole lot of stable orbits in there. You're really too close to the planet to have a stable orbit inside the bottom edge of the rings. And yet there's still stuff falling off of the rings through that space into Saturn's upper atmosphere. And Cassini proved that was actually happening.
Raid or something?
Hodge Unicorn just cheered 5 bits. That's awesome. Thank you. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thanks very much for that. It also...
Oh, we were rated.
Were we? I missed that somehow.
Sage.
Rocket Sage! Welcome!
26. Holy crap.
That's awesome. That Murdered Bird is now following. Thank you for the follow. Welcome, Raiders.
Now you need the experience of Eddie in your face.
Alrighty. So for the follow...
He's got it.
For follows and bits. Hey, Eddie.
Eddie, over here.
We feed our wiggle butts. How are you, Eddie?
He's going to knock something down.
There you go. Good boy. All right. Mooga Fuga. Seen you before. Thanks for subscribing. Every subscription is bits. That's where all the For Science came from. That makes sense.
Yeah. So
Chronic 206. There we go.
I want to be annoying.
How you doing, Rocket? Good to see you. How was your stream earlier? Hodge Unicorn. Thanks for joining us today. We're doing a hangout-a-thon. We've been going for 15 hours now.
I don't know.
15 or 16?
Your hour's almost up.
My hour's almost up. Oh. Well, I guess we won't get to Satellite 201, but I like talking about Cassini, so we can definitely do that. Thank you, whoever unbanned me from using emotes upon a raid.
Yeah, sorry. It's just, it happens.
Yeah.
It happens.
Silly Nightbot. I'm going to blame Nightbot because Nightbot's convenient.
Why is it not letting me click? Fine, be that way.
But
Hey,
as...
click one here, or here, or here.
You have all night to talk satellites. To a certain degree.
Well,
we might talk about some of it later. We might get there in one of the open hours. But my dedicated hour is just about up. I want to thank everybody for the opportunity here. I'm going to stay here until Annie's ready to...
well, I need
to switch over.
I
Take your time. I'm not in a rush.
think why won't it let me click?
I didn't do it. Broken Symmetry, thank you for the bits.
It won't let me, it literally won't let me close the tab. Okay, there we go. WTF. Is this the wrong zoom?
If my BOE, back of the envelope, calculations are right, the small solar system means it takes 17,000 years to travel to the sun from the Earth at airliner speed. That sounds about right. I know it takes about 6 months for an airliner, 747, something like that, to travel from the Earth to the moon one way. It's that far away. Kevlar 1066, thank you for the bits. Bits work, folks. We love the bits. If you would rather, you can go to Patreon and donate there. You can donate via Streamlabs. Every little bit, if you'll forgive the pun, helps. Every big bit helps. Everything that you can afford keeps us going, and we really appreciate it. We're working toward the day when we can have secure funding and not have to beg for our supper, sing for our supper, as Dr. Pamela likes to put it. But until that day, we're gonna be here and we're gonna bring this to you as best we can. For science, Mooga Fuga, absolutely. Rocket Sage, thanks for the sub. That's awesome. I love your streams, by the way. It's really a shame that I can't have you in one ear while I'm at work trying to solve satellite problems anymore, but that's good stuff. What you guys stream today? An Intelsat Cup #1 raffle. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention my company Intelsat is not only paying for 8 hours of my time here volunteering, they also donated some plastic cups with lids and straws, so that's going to be going out as door prizes.
There. It's right there.
Here we go. Envision,
it gets green
connect.
screened out.
It gets green screen because it's blue, naturally. But
Start using. Okay. I was using the wrong thing.
okay.
Pamela's like, just let it autocomplete. No, that was a lie.
I don't.
Are you effing... Why? Why does capitalization matter?
Poor Annie. Can a raffle be your Satellites 201 talk?
I mean,
That might be cool.
well, the weather looks bad tonight, so
So at some point we may have some extra time, and we can definitely riff on satellites.
there we go.
All right.
Yes, I want.
So I think, what is it, Disaster Piece Theater is coming up next?
Yes, Disaster Piece Theater is coming up.
All
Okay,
right.
cool. I don't know why Mika's thing is sideways. She's sideways.
Is that her camera?
Yeah. Yeah. See, it's not just me. I can see Susie grinning too. I don't know why it's sideways. Is it?
I mean, in space,
sideways?
there is no like objective up and down, so this is kind of cool, actually. It's
I don't know how Pamela uses this mouse. Ask her. Is she supposed to be sideways? I don't know.
is Mika supposed to be 90 degrees rotated from?
Hold on. I hate this mouse.
Why are they satellites when they are in space, but meteorites are on Earth? Satellites just mean they're in orbit. Most of the time when we say satellite, we're meaning a human-made spacecraft that gets launched into space by humans. But technically speaking, the moon is a satellite of the Earth. Titan is a satellite of Saturn.
Oh, it's because she's left-handed. Damn it.
Yes. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that was your problem,
Yes,
Annie.
that was my problem. The mouse is like backwards.
Annie is over here struggling because Dr. Pamela's mouse is left-handed and Annie is not. And
Like, why am I having such a
well.
problem? Oh, no, and now we lost Mika. Oh, there she is. Okay.
Chronic 206, I think there's startups that are trying to get rid of junk. Yes, that is one of the possible applications of Intelsat's MEV-1. Actually, it's somebody else's satellite that they launched for us. But one of the goals is to go up, and especially for satellites that fail in an orbit that allow them not to stay up there for a long time and we can't communicate with them easily, they can just go up and grab it and then drag it back into the atmosphere and it'll be fine. Is one possible use of that. Anyway, I think my time is up and our next guest is ready. So as soon as everybody else is ready, I'm going to pass it over to Susie.
I have no idea how I'm setting this up. Oh, wait, there's Zoom.
So thanks very much for your bits and your subs and your follows, and keep them coming. And we'll see you on the other side of the break.
Go away. I promise. I'll make the spider go away.
And he's making the spider go away.
I'm trying to figure out where the top of the screen is. Okay. I should not have messed with things. Okay, so this is mostly going to be... Oh, Susie can't hear us. Okay. Wow.
Oh, really welcome, Nurglegrin.
Okay, so
We'll probably see you later.
I need to undo... How do I... Clear?
Mm-hmm.
Clear?
Clear,
all right.
Clear everything and then put it
I
back.
don't know what I'm doing. I should not be allowed to use technology. Because there's supposed to be, like, all sorts of cool things about, like, who you are and what you do on screen. And I'm just at the point where I'm like, okay, cool. We got somebody on screen. Why is there 2 copies of this? Oh, no. I'm not messing with that. Alright, we're just gonna have this roll just as it is. If it looks good to you, it looks good to me. I think I need to have this layer on.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, I think I did it, y'all. What do you think? Take this